Okay, good morning. It is August 29th. There's a special meeting of the Hardwick Electric Department. All of the commissioners are here, as well as Beth Esray and Sarah Brace, the general manager. I don't see anybody from the public, so we can get started. And then we have a limited agenda. If anybody has any adjustments they want to make to the agenda, it's a pretty simple one. And if not, we'll go right into it. So this is kind of the outcome of just trying to figure out what we're doing for policy and delegation of authority and organization of the department going forward. I think we all got a new life on what we're doing here in the last 6 months. I've had the opportunity to actually meet with Sarah and go through some documents. There's kind of a lot of policy descriptions that some I wasn't even aware of that date back to 1987 that dictate how the place is run. Then there's stuff we did in 21, and there's some new documents Sarah put together to try and coalesce everything into one document, which I think is important. So I think it'd be good if we go through some of this stuff, decide what's good, what's bad, and how we want to just make it one document and get rid of, I don't want to go back to 1987. Unfortunately, I was born before then, but I still don't want to go back there. So I'm gonna go start with the newest. Like, this was the thing that we did. Oh, I guess you can't. There it is. In 21, which is this delegation of authority that we did back then, which has some good points to it. It was I think it was the outcome of us having some issues with what was going on with the department at the time. I think most of it is good. There are some things here. I don't know if anybody has this handy, but I'll read. There was 11.
Mike, should we screen share it?
Only like this, unless Sarah has
Hang on
it.
one second. I could pull it up.
That'd be great.
I'm looking at mine from it's in the meeting maker for the meeting. If you want to open it, look at it, but sometimes it's helpful to.
Yeah, we could all look at the same one at the same moment.
So do you want the original or the one that I had commented on? I just want to make sure I pull up the right one.
Yeah. Why don't you do the one you commented on?
Okay. Okay. Can you guys see that okay?
Let me see. Nothing. There it is.
Where
Okay.
it is.
Okay. Is it big enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now your comments are everything that's purpled, I guess.
Yes.
And is this can we see what the change is? Or are we only able to see? It's not in.
I didn't propose specific changes. I simply
Okay.
commented on this specific
Okay.
document, and then there's
So
another
this is
one.
it, just highlighted. It's just
Correct,
kind of
yes.
okay.
Can you see on this side, on the sidebar, that there are what the comments were or are?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, let me get some people out of here. Okay.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. And so if I could, I mean, to walk through some of them, I was hoping, some of my comments were to identify which number of the previous policies they were replacing and tried to identify ones that it looked like some of these
Yeah.
were in reference to, and whether they were superseded by parts of the personnel policy or the procurement policy, because I know some of the financial documents or contracts or purchases over a certain value are covered by the new procurement policy. And Beth, I don't know if you want to talk through what precipitated those changes, but my understanding was that because we were getting the FEMA money.
Yep. This FEMA had to have a certain policy in place, and we worked with Eli to come up with a standard policy that he has been using in other places, which the thresholds are, when this policy was approved, the thresholds are 10,000 and under, the GM can sign with no official board action or approval. 10 to 250,000, the board has to assign a representative to approve the expenditure. So that way the board is seeing it, but the board makes a motion that's their representative can enter into the contract or the purchase. Anything over 250,000 has to be actual board approval, board motion, resolution, properly signed, all that good kind of stuff.
Is that specific to FEMA money or in general? Do they tell us
In
that's
general.
In general.
Yes.
So Huh. So when we have 40,000, they're saying it's 10,000,
Yep.
right? If I heard that right?
And just from a financial standpoint, when it says capital expenditures that are not part of project expenditures, that's a little bit
Build-
more specific
Build
than
to
what's
ta
in there.
build to ratepayers. That's because when we talked about it, you know, if there's a new service being installed and it's being 100% billed to a ratepayer, it really doesn't matter if it's 10, 50, 100 or any amount because it's fully being billed to the ratepayer.
Okay.
We didn't
Yeah.
want to be a roadblock to doing that. Now, is that in conflict in any way, you think, Beth, with the
Yeah.
FEMA thing?
Because the purchasing policy says anything under 10,000, the GM can. There's no differentiation between if it's part of expenditures billed to ratepayers, anything like that. It just says expenditures up to 10,000, the GM can do. Any from 10 to 250, the board knows about it. The board authorizes their representative to enter into that purchase/contract.
Okay.
So it doesn't sound, Mike, I hope it's okay if I speak up. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to find
please.
a shortcut here. Would it be adequate to just change the 40,000 to 10? And that would make this supportive of that purchasing policy, not in conflict?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing, but you may have to get rid of the back of the sentence also.
Why do you have to do that? I don't follow that because that's, I
Because
don't,
Beth is saying FEMA doesn't care whether it's related to the rates or not, right?
okay.
Beth?
Yeah.
That you sure about that?
So
Eli worked through this policy.
there's three different purchase types that are identified in the procurement policy. There's the incidental purchases not exceeding $500, a micro purchase of supplies or services using a simplified acquisition procedure, and that is the present standard is 10,000. It may be increased to 50,000 under certain conditions. Then there's the simplified acquisition threshold, and that's HED may purchase property or services using the small purchase methods, and that threshold is $250,000. So there's three different types of purchases.
But we're just talking about capital expenditures here.
Right.
Not expenses.
And so how, just so I have a full understanding, how would you define or categorize the capital expenditure? And do you mean like a big project like the phase one of the Craftsbury circuit, like that sort of
Anything-
project?
Anything that's going to be capitalized. That's what a capital expenditure is. And
But
Beth
most of, sorry,
Beth
go
can
ahead.
explain that, but yeah.
I mean, most of the purchases that we make would be something that's capitalized because it's all put to plant for the most part, with the exception of, you know, labor and not all labor, but some labor and things like
So
that.
labor gets capitalized. That
Based
project.
on his explanation, it sounds like if we lower that to the 10,000, they would sync up.
Great.
Okay, so let's do that.
So,
And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so when we say get them to sync up, are we talking about modifying one or other of the documents? How do we get them to sync up?
Just this.
Do this. Yeah. We're going to try and end up with one policy with an attachment, which will be some form of this to make it easy.
Yeah. And this doesn't make, a purchasing policy is much more detailed, and it really is for the two of you, how you run the organization and what you follow and what your people follow. This is at a different level. This is when does the GM come to the board? So this is a delegation of authority that it's not the same. It's a different level of policy.
Beth,
Now,
correct me if I'm wrong, but that is covered in here, right? In the procurement policy, when to come to the board and when specific board of commissioner authority is required.
But it's, yes,
Yeah,
it
and
is based on dollar
we're making
threshold.
sure we're making sure that we're consistent with that. But we want this to be, this is a more typical delegation of authority that is just covers matters both relating to spending and organization design and annual budgets. And this covers a wide range of things, but only with respect to where the board has to get involved. In other words, it's not trying to put its arms around a whole bunch of other things that you do in running day to day, running Hardwick Electric Department. In other words, it's not as comprehensive as some of your other policies. But absolutely, we need it to be consistent, not in conflict.
So I think changing it to 10,000 puts us there.
If it does, that's great.
And the only other question is, do we have to add the second item between
Yeah.
up to 250,000?
I don't know why you would, because
I
if
don't
you're,
think so.
if it's over 10, then it's any amount over 10, including 250, right?
That's true. Yep. Okay. So that's an easy change.
It's kind of a pain for you two, but if that's what we got to do to keep FEMA happy.
I
we'll
just
do
want
it.
to make sure that I understand this right, and I'm going to use an example to do that. So when we have to order poles to replace, because we order poles all the time,
Yep.
and it's generally more than $10,000. So this policy would say, because that's capitalized, it's a 50-year asset. Part of it is capitalized at a minimum. So all of those purchase orders would have to come to the board for signature every time.
Yeah, I think that's why we made this 40,000 back then, is because we thought, it has to be a
Yep.
reasonable number. And yes, 10,000 is a pretty low number.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt, but do we or don't we have to do it to satisfy FEMA? If we do, we do.
But is that not part of capital project expenditures billed to ratepayers?
Not all of
If
it.
it's polls?
I mean, we do bulk purchases of poles, so
Oh,
it's just as
oh,
much.
okay.
So
I'm
there's
with
going to be
you.
a bulk purchase.
I'm
I mean,
with you.
there's it's at least once a quarter, if not every 6 weeks, that we're ordering poles because we're replacing
Yeah.
poles that have birth dates of 55, 60, 87, so they're very old and I just want to make sure that I understand, because I mean, if it's full, like every invoice that comes through basically is
just to
going to require
Yeah, and just to confirm, it wouldn't be every invoice, because if for example, you have a project that gets approved for $200,000, then all of your purchase orders to spend that 200, once you've got the project approved, then you don't have to reapprove every expenditure under that project. So you get your approval for a project, and then if you have to order things for it, you're good to go. Now, with respect to the polls in normal course, yeah, I regret that. Yeah.
Well, let
I
me
don't know
ask
how
you
we
this.
do it. I don't know how we do it. Keep FEMA satisfied.
Well,
not-
let me ask you this.
Mhm.
If these projects, like normal purchases of poles, are included in the budget that has been approved,
Mhm.
then would they still need to be approved again when the individual dollars come in, if they've already been approved in the budget?
Yeah, like the normal course of, our
Like
plan for
polls.
the year is to replace 100 poles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
that gives you an
transformers and
approval.
yep.
That's a good point, Beth.
So if the budget, if those projects are included in the budget and the budget's been approved,
Then
then do
they've been
we
approved.
still need to send you a purchase order every time something's over $10,000 if it meets these qualifications?
I would
I-
think not, but I'm just trying not to get in trouble with FEMA. It seems like you've already satisfied FEMA by putting that policy in place on purchasing. And as long as we've got a paper trail that we're endeavoring to follow it one way or another, we're probably okay, right?
Yep.
But so
I
what do you
think that's
want
the
to
way
do?
around it.
So what do you want to do here?
I would make the 10,000 so FEMA sees it, but then we have an approved budget that's more than that, and that's already been approved.
Or you
Wow.
could say that are not part of project expenditures billed to ratepayers or projects previously approved in budgeting, in the budget.
Dollars approved from the budget. We can come up with some wording.
Yeah. Yep.
But we need to get the words right here because we're gonna vote on this, so.
Well, let's say not part of project expenditure billed to taxpayers or previously approved capital expenditures in the approved budget.
Well, in order to consolidate some documents, can that, at least that one line there, can we not modify our purchasing policy?
I don't
We
know.
already have?
If you need it to keep FEMA happy and you've already done it, in other organizations, the two would not have to be identical because they have different purposes. You know, again, it's that you've got a very comprehensive thing for operating HED, and this is just with respect to your interaction with the Board of Commissioners.
Which I think is covered in the procurement policy though, because I mean, it specifically there's a whole section, purchasing authority, and it lists the types of purchases and exactly what all other procurement, there's a whole other thing that says it specifically has to be authorized by the Board of Commissioners, by the majority of
wanna be
commissioners
consistent.
present.
Yeah, we want to be consistent. with
Right,
that.
so it sounds to me like the root of this is actually that we don't have a process or policy in place for capital budgeting and capital plans, and it seems like if the capital budget was developed, created, presented, proposed, reviewed, and approved, then these things would fall under that. And I'm wondering if that's a more comprehensive way to actually.
But that isn't actually how we are. I was trying to give you the
Well-
latitude, but the way it works in organizations is even if you put, especially with us, where we often have a scope of capital things we want to do and need to do that's way beyond our means when we do every year's budget. And then as we go through the year, we kind of check and see, do we have the sources of funds to do them or not? Big projects, we do need to reapprove again
Right.
before
And
we
I'm
pull
not
the
saying
trigger,
that-
because that's the moment where Beth tells us, okay, this is how we're gonna do this big project. This is where we're gonna get the money. And should we go forward or not? And so you do need that for major projects, even if they were in the capital spending part of the budget is a little bit, how would you call it, Beth? It's a little bit sort of pro forma, maybe if, you know, it kind of puts everything out in view and it says, this is what's in the budget. This is what's we might do beyond the budget. And
Right.
then as we go through the year, depending on our sources of funds, we modify it. So you don't want to, you shouldn't take away the view that a major capital project, once the budget's approved, you're just kind of good to go and roll.
Oh, well, this would still, the way I'm reading, this would still fall within the qualification if it's under 10,000.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
So
So
even if it's in the budget, if something is over that 10,000,
Right.
those costs still have to come through y'all anyway.
Right.
perhaps I wasn't clear in what I was suggesting. I think there are two types of budgets that the department and utilities need to have and prepare. One of which is the operating budget, which covers regular operating expenses. The other is a separate standalone capital improvements or capital budget that has the very
Right.
specific projects. And with all due respect, I think when you
Which we
rely
always do.
on
Which we always
fitting
do.
these projects into a regular, operating budget, they don't happen. And that's why we're in a position where we're at, where we've got a lot of large projects that need to occur, and that planning and kind of forethought to put aside the funding and create the capital reserve, and understanding the recent years have exacerbated that problem as far as cash flow. But I think when you dedicate that space, that budget, that planning to a outside of regular operations and operating expenses, I think it sets the utility up for a much stronger path in the future.
Well, we do that. I'm not sure. I'm sure we can do it better, but Beth does that. Part of the budget is the capital. I mean, every budget always has both operating and capital.
And again, this is going back to kind of this whole discussion about what FEMA's words were. Well, FEMA's description was any expenses over 10,000 or capital over 10,000 that we're trying to
Well,
abide
the
by.
FEMA thing was about purchasing, so it would be expense or capital, right?
Anything you
Me either.
purchase.
Yeah. This is not a purchasing. There's nothing in here about purchasing. So this doesn't really conflict with purchasing. This is approving capital expenditure project.
Yeah.
And once the project's approved, you go purchase your stuff by your purchasing policy.
By the purchasing policy, right?
So is it easy enough just to change this to capital expenditure projects above 10,000? They're not part of the project expenditures billed to ratepayers and have not been previously approved by the board on the annual budget.
I'm not sure, frankly, you need to change anything here, but
Except the 40,000?
well, I don't even know if you need to change the 40,000, but because it's not a purchasing policy, it's the capital expenditure project approval.
Yeah.
It doesn't negate anything that's in the purchasing policy.
I guess I keep
you
going back to the
could, you
fact
could
that most
add
of the
another,
purchases.
we could add a number, we could add another item on purchasing where we in between number 1 and number 2, we could put a new number 2 that says we're going to follow the purchasing policy, which specifies, and just repeat the purchasing policy.
Or
If that would be helpful to you, Sarah, if that allays what you're worried about, a potential conflict.
No, I mean,
confirm there's no
I just keep going back to the fact that I think, most of the purchases we make are capital expenditures. It's whether it's a special, separate capital project or if it's part of the day-to-day maintenance and operations, because the equipment and the things and the materials we buy 99% of the time are a capital expenditure. And so I'm not trying to split hairs. I'm just trying to understand, like, is that already covered here? Is it that it needs to specifically state, something that can be ongoing, that capital projects, capital, budgets should be created and obviously approved through the Board of Commissioners. And
But
I
that's
think
already
that makes
done.
total
So-
sense. I think it's kind of, from what I saw, there's no separate capital budget. There was a separate column that says, if we have the money, then this would be spent here. But for the most part, and Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are expensed, not billed to capital.
No, there's a capital, there's the capital page is your capital budget. Beth does it.
In connection
They're not
with
expenses.
others. I don't just
Yeah.
generate it, but yeah, there is
So
a
I guess,
capital budget.
the IOP that I had drafted, the annual operating and capital planning budgets, that was my attempt to try and formalize this in a way that meets and aligns with both the procurement policy and, structure of authority and governance policies, that would, work through some of these things without splitting hairs and also lay the foundation for clearer policy. But personally, I think that this list of items is fairly vague, but also touches
It may
on so
be.
many other things that already exist that it's a challenge for me to look at
Okay.
and actually be able to walk through these because, there's all
It's
these
not-
other competing
But hold on,
policies.
time out. This list it's only vague if you don't understand what capital expenditure projects are. I mean, that's capital expenditure projects is not a vague term, it's a specific term. It's a pretty precise term. Loans or leases are specific. There's nothing vague. Contract. As I go through this, I don't find anything that's vague. What you're pointing to is you're wanting this to cover, you're concerned that it doesn't cover things that are in other policies that relate to the internal operations of Hardwick Electric, or maybe things that FEMA has said you need to comply with. This is specifically the delegation of authority. So this is your interface with the Board of Commissioners. So what needs to be in here? And potentially the annual budget approval, it's always been both operating and capital. So that's assumed that, as a business person, that's always in the budget, yeah, both. If that's something that people are, I don't think you need to change that, but if somebody here doesn't understand that the capital budget is part of the annual budget, then we could always say operating and capital.
Well, the FERC chart of accounts and guidance from the FERC chart of accounts and how utility accounting is supposed to occur, there are separate budgets for each type of plant for distribution, generation, transmission, and also between regular maintenance and operating expenses and capital. They are separate, and so I'm trying to help us align with both the federal requirements
No,
for utility accounting and also the rest of it.
but that's accounting. That's not.
Yeah, this is more procedure than accounting.
Yeah, let's not get overly grandiose. Let's just say practical. Where do we need to help? Where do we need to help things along through this? Let's get to specific changes that are needed.
I want to throw in my 2 cents worth.
Yeah.
We've got so many different documents that exist,
Mhm.
that so many of these things in this short document are mentioned in other documents that and this one, the only place that this was part of was the board meeting minutes.
Mhm.
And I didn't even know it existed, which is neither here nor there. That's not the problem. But if we just had one set of policies, whether it's policies that the procurement policy, it can be a separate policy for, the finances, in the relationship with the board. But I just feel like this particular document covers so many different areas that we already have existing policies, that maybe we just need to take this information and update our existing policies to incorporate all these pieces. Because like Mike said, we had some policies from the 80s that he didn't even know existed. And some of this is covered in there. Does it need updating? Absolutely. But I'm just trying to keep it to where we don't have to go to so many different places to find our policies.
So
Well,
We
I think
incorporate
here-
we're full
these.
circle to a discussion we had a few months ago, where this issue of conflicting and confusing policies was raised. And at that time, where the discussion landed, I think, Michael, you floated this, was, this is a big problem. It's going to be something that we need to address over time, but ultimately it's not the fire that is burning hottest in terms of our operations. So maybe at each commission meeting, Sarah, Beth, you bring one policy where you have a suggested change and we chip away at it incrementally. And I still think that makes a lot of sense.
Well,
However,
let me just follow up on, because there is Sarah did put together a draft of a policy for all the
Perfect.
policies, which
Yeah.
kind of incorporates some of this into what she wrote, which is really good that we can go through. I brought this up first because there's things in here that we've done that's the latest I want to make sure we cover. But I think almost all of this is covered in her draft of the policy that replaces the old policies. But I want to make sure the ones that are in here we agree with, and then we can look at how they relate to the government's policy that Sarah put together. And that should be the thing that we say, okay, that's the one we're going to vote on, as opposed to the 21 thing is already in here in some way. If we have to adjust it, that's fine. But that we only have one document instead of three.
Yeah, in other words, this becomes part of that big book whenever
Yeah.
it's really
Yes.
created. Yeah.
but
So back to the page though.
Yeah, go back to the page so we can go through the items that I thought were questionable.
Hang on one second. Oop, I can do it. Hold on.
I think just in terms
So-
of prioritization, though, I would love for us to focus our limited time on things, on policy issues that are actually holding up your execution of work, Sarah. I'm not clear on what those are at this point. If there are some, then great, let's address them. If it's not actively holding you up, then I would love for us to move our focus onto some of the operational things that we need to discuss.
Well,
I mean,
I-
go ahead.
I think if we go through just the begin, and Sarah's thing is 14 pages. I think there's 8 or 9 items, but if we just get item 1 right, 1, 2, and 3, which is the delegation of responsibility,
Great.
that would clear it. We don't have to go through everything today, but that one first section is so important because then it sets the role of what we do and what she does. At least she can go forward with a clear distinction of where the cut lines are, and then the rest behind it we can do, yes, at subsequent meetings. let's get the
So what do you,
delegation
so we're
authority.
talking about the sheet we're looking at. Does anything need to
No.
change here? Let's re-vote on it again.
Well, no, I'm talking more about this one, which is the one Sarah did, which is a draft of a governance
but
policy. It's pretty simple.
It's simple, but I mean, it's,
The line items on the one that
I
I
don't think
provided.
you're not gonna get my vote for that one.
Board of
Okay.
Commissioners retains authority to approve annual budget and 5-year capital improvement plan budget, rate approvals as authorized under Vermont PUC rules and regulations, capital expenditures above a defined threshold, which is referenced in the procurement policy,
Where are you
personnel
reading from, Sarah?
decisions. I'm
Hey,
reading from
Sarah?
the piece that I
Sarah,
put
put
together.
on the screen share what you're talking to, so we can see what. I think it
The
was up.
pieces that I put in there specifically, delegation
Yeah.
authority, and this is the draft governance policy, which I was requested to provide draft policies of the things that were creating issue, and this is part of it. Annual budget, 5-year improvement plan, rate approvals, capital expenditures above a defined threshold, and we can add as defined in the procurement policy. Personnel decisions involving chief executive officer staffing, including hiring and firing, adoption or amendment of governance policies. And then it lists out what the general manager is delegated full authority and autonomy to do. Hire, supervise, evaluate staff, including wages, benefits, programs within approved budget limits. Negotiate and execute labor union agreements, including wages, benefits, and working conditions within approved thresholds. Exceeding threshold of the approved annual budget requires additional Board of Commissioners approval. Execute contracts within approved thresholds. Manage procurement operations and emergency response. Again, we can reference in compliance with the procurement policy or any of the other ones that need to be put in place. Recommend, establish, and enforce internal policies and operating procedures to ensure regulatory compliance and reporting requirements.
Where are
Sarah,
you right
scroll
now?
down.
Next page.
Sarah, are you reading proposals, the original language? What are
No,
This is
she's
the-
reading what
this
she
is the-
put together on whatever this date was. It was a while ago.
The last meeting was
August
part of the,
14th.
I
And
guess
so what I'm
without
saying is we should stop
understanding-
right at 3.25 as a stopping point,
Right.
because that's all about commissioners versus general manager. The
Right.
rest is good stuff, but if we can get that first part, and maybe we don't
I
have to
don't
vote on it
think-
today, but if we go through it and modify it and then redo it,
I don't, I don't think it's in the time we have available, which is 26 minutes.
okay?
I don't think it's conceivable to get this to comport with the earlier 2021 delegation of authority.
Well, all right, so let me suggest this. Why don't we finish
Why are
2020?
you, and what, I don't understand the move from, this is two things. The board, the concept on the page here of saying the first top half is the Board of Commissioners retains authority. And then at the bottom, the general manager, I think what it would say is the Board of Commissioners delegates full. You don't really need the delegates full authority and autonomy to. Beth and Sarah have the authority to run Hardwick Electric according to its policies and to run Hardwick Electric except for certain things that have to come to the commissioners. And the list from 2021 is the list of what the except you run the Hardwick Electric except for you come to the Board of Commissioners for these things, which is a completely different construction than this page. And so the bottom half of this page, the problem is that could be on and on and on of what you do to run Hardwick Electric. Basically, you do everything except for, and the top half of the page is the except for, and the 2021 is the comprehensive except for list.
But
So
the except for list
would
from
throw this
2021
out.
conflicts
Throw
with
this out.
the 2021
some-
list conflicts with my employment contract and also the job description of the general manager.
Well,
That's the
it seems
issue.
like we need it. I find that hard to believe. I don't think that's true, but
There are some
it
discrepancies.
doesn't
in
matter. It
2021.
doesn't matter. I mean, let's go through and
It's me.
talk about it, but this, a position description or those other things are a different animal. This is when do you need to come to the board?
Okay,
That's
and I'm
pretty-
gonna say some of this stuff on
Very
2020
limited.
is in discrepancy with some previous policies that we have to just do something with, or say this supersedes everything previous,
Of course, yeah,
and then that's it.
but that's relatively easy.
That's just a sentence.
So then that also supersedes my most recent employment contract and the job description that was issued and relayed and publicized and published and put out for this position. I think that's the issue, is that
That's
the
unfortunate
but
if it's,
for
why
is
don't you
at odds
show
with
us?
what I was hired for.
but that, I find that hard to believe, so you need to show us that specifically. What's the issue?
I have showed that. I have tried to express that on multiple occasions, and I can I can say it again, and I can
No, but
put it in
stop.
writing the same way
Stop
I
for a minute.
have.
Go back to the delegation of authority list and show us specifically which item needs to be reworded so that you can do the things you want to do, you need to do.
Creation of salaried positions, staff reorganizations, labor contracts and staff compensation and benefit changes. If it's outside of the actual budget, I could understand that. But if it's within the budget and the actual negotiations, which is part of my job description explicitly, that the general manager is to negotiate the IBEW union contract. I was explicitly told by this board that I could not do that without multiple board commissioners present, in addition to Labor Council, even though that was written into my job description and contract. The regulatory filings piece. Obviously, the budget stuff is perfectly fine,
Okay.
and the procurement things follow in line with the procurement policy.
So your concern or your issue is number 10, number 11,
And 5.
and 5. So you
Number
think
5.
you think that you should be able to do regulatory filings without having the commissioners on board with you?
There
No,
are
I think-
regulatory filings due every month that it is infeasible for
Okay.
the board to review and approve every single one.
Great.
If there are
So why
specific,
don't you just say the nature of, why don't you just tell us the wording we need to put there? Because what we're thinking about is the major regulatory filings, like the ones we just did recently. So if there's an except for that needs to go in there, a clarification, just do it. The point is a major regulatory filing. Our position is we're not doing our job if we're not on board when it gets filed.
We don't want a long-range strategic plan going into the PUC without our getting eyes on it. We want your hands to be totally free to do everything that you need to do.
So to be specific. And so change that. Creation of new salaried positions, employee positions, that's just adding positions to your workforce. If you want to add a position, that you got to get that approved. That's normal course. And it's only the compensation packages that are associated with those positions. Your normal course stuff for your existing compensation, that just is part of the budgeting process, where you say, hey, we're going to do raises, we're going to do, we're going to, whatever else you're going to do, we're going to change benefits. That's covered in the budgeting process. And then labor contracts, do you really think you can sign a labor contract without?
it says clearly negotiating. I fully would expect that the board is to execute on that labor contract.
Mhm.
But I wasn't even given an opportunity to even enter negotiations without almost a full board participation. And it actually delayed the execution or negotiations by 45 days.
Let me
And
just
that's
add one.
it's not a criticism, but it is the truth. I mean, that's what you pay professional staff for, is to do those
Yeah.
sorts of things during regular
So-
business hours.
Look,
This-
Raj, before you go, let me just put one sentence here. So here's one of the sentences that would have been added under what the general manager does. Negotiate and execute labor union agreements, including wages, benefits, and working conditions within approved thresholds. So I think what Sarah's saying is we set the threshold, then she goes and negotiates as the general manager. Are we saying we don't want her to go do that?
No, but again, this is a more normal way to specify it, which is the union labor contract has to be approved by the commissioners. That everybody understands that. In order for the commissioners to approve the labor contract, a normal CEO or head of an organization would bring the commissioners along through the negotiation. And that would be, the way it's traditionally been done at Hardwick Electric is some number of the commissioners participated, or it could have been just periodic reviews. It could have been having the discussion, the strategy. This is how we're doing it. The leader, the general manager, would bring the commissioners along at the start of the negotiations, through the negotiations. So when you get to the end and you say, we got a deal, we're on board. They're in the know. They're in the process. So the lead negotiator would be the general manager, but you bring it along. All this says is you can't sign a union labor contract. And you can't commit to the annual staff compensation and benefit changes without approval.
But that's part of the annual
normal.
budget, right?
Yes. So this is, and you gotta trust me a little bit. This is normal. This is a normal list of what the top manager in an organization has to get board sign off on. It's a pretty limited list. I agree with you on something like regulatory filings. That sounds vague. If there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen weekly or monthly, let's get specific. What are the regulatory filings? What Miles just said is exactly what we're thinking. It's major documents that go in. And any head of an organization, any top manager in an organization reporting to a board would want the board sign off, because you don't want to be hanging out there committing the organization without knowing you got your board behind you.
I'm just going back to when you said bring us along. So the general manager is negotiating with people, keeping us up to speed on what's going on, but not bringing us up to speed is not bringing us along. She's still doing the actual negotiation within thresholds.
Yeah, but I don't think in this document you need to say that. In this document, the fact is that you're going to she can't enter into a labor contract. The board has to approve the labor agreement. That's not the issue, right, Sarah? You know that.
Right.
You don't have the authority to sign the labor agreement without board approval, right?
I understand.
Do you understand that? And
I
there's nothing you
understand.
read.
Yep,
There's nothing
I
you read in
understand.
your position description or you're thinking that you had the authority to do that.
I understand, Roger. Thank you.
Okay.
My
So
question would be on the negotiation. I think it's like, just from my limited background here, I'm understanding there's a distinction between the negotiation process and the execution. I think the execution seems clear to everyone, but are you specifying here, like number 11 doesn't specify anything about that negotiation process?
And I don't think
Yeah.
we need to.
I don't know that you need to
Okay.
here, but I think to have a good collaborative relationship between the board and the top executive, before you start the union negotiation, you say, okay, at the end of this, you guys are going to have to approve it. So how do you want to be involved? Here's how I'd like you involved. I'd like you to just wait for me to get it all done, and then I'll tell you. And then somebody would say, nah, it'll probably go better if we collaborate on this. And the top, if I were the head of this organization, I'd go to the board and I'd say, okay, we're going to go in and negotiate. Let's get some agreement of parameters, priorities, boundaries. I'll come back to you if it's heading somewhere else. And then that would be the moment to say people need to be involved or not.
And my understanding is that the wages are the primary concern issue budgetary impact for this contract, which was discussed at length and approved in the budgeting process. So if it went above the
No.
anticipated,
Yeah, no, that's not. I mean, we just throw it at the wall. we strategize when we do the budget of what we want to throw in there. And so, yeah, that's a separate topic.
Yeah,
So I think 5 needs updated wording. And then Sarah, does this discussion indicate that you think 10 and 11 are acceptable, or that you think you're still requesting changes?
I don't think 10 and 11 are acceptable in the way that they are structured, primarily because I'll give a prime example. In the org chart I proposed, there are 4 new job descriptions, job titles for the office. One of which is an assistant business manager position. That is a salaried position. That is an exempt position. So even though it's the same pay rate as would be equivalent in the hourly rate as being paid, that has to go through full board approval, even though it is a restructuring, clarification, and clearly defining and articulating the duties and accountability for each staff person. That has held me up. I've been handcuffed in whether to actually proceed with that, how to proceed with it, because the language in this says that every single one of those would have to go through the board because it is a new position, even though it is not really a new position. It is simply reshuffling job duties and names, the title.
Yeah.
So I do think that it is
My
not
argument would
actually-
be that a creation of a new salaried position would be reviewed by the top executive with the board always, absolutely. Creation of a new salary position in a small organization like this is a big deal. And arriving at the right salary rate and benefits and is a big deal. You know, I don't think the chief of police in Hardwick can create a new position without the select board. I don't think Opie could.
It's a union contract, it's different.
It doesn't matter. This is talking about governance and how you work. So
I would agree. I think that it sounds like there's room to streamline our processes in terms of hammering out what these positions are, so you don't feel handcuffed. But I'm not comfortable changing the delegation of authority such that it would bypass the commission in the future.
It's not meant, none of the changes that I have expressed or articulated are meant in any way, shape, or form to bypass the commission. I do think that it is meant to, my comments, my concerns are meant to actually be granted the trust I feel like I wasn't supposed to be granted in this role, without feeling like I literally can't make a decision without it going to the board. And I understand that there are major decisions and there are also operational decisions. And I think that this is a huge struggle for me, because it does seem that whatever I propose, it's either not looked at, not reviewed, or it doesn't have time to be reviewed. And then it just doesn't happen. And then it becomes to a head like this. I mean, Beth is retiring next year. The succession plan needs to occur. And I told the commission at the last couple meetings, we almost lost the person who was most informed of this because they were being recruited by another company. I apologize if I did not wait for it, but no, I didn't. I negotiated with that person because it is a valued employee that I wanted to keep, that you should want to keep. And it's not like there's ever really time to, you know, call a special meeting. It's a hassle. We all know it. It's a hassle. It's hard. You guys take time out of your business day, and I understand that. But I should also be entrusted with the ability to make that decision, knowing I'm not trying to bankrupt or cause any harm or exceed the budgetary, staffing levels and wages and benefits. That's not the intent. That never will be the intent. That's why a full annual budget happens. That is the goalpost. Those are the guidelines. If I'm not exceeding it and I'm not causing harm, and I'm actually retaining and recruiting employees, which is also in my job description and one of my main primary duties, then how is that outside of the bounds of my duties and role, and in any way outside of the authority I am granted, or thought I was granted when taking this position?
My
well,
reaction
there's
to
a
that
lot,
is-
there's a lot there. There's a lot there, Mike, in terms of just helping Sarah learn how to work with a board in terms of make, we can together agree to have a special meeting tomorrow if it's vital. you know, any day, anytime something comes up, we can always put something top of the agenda for a monthly meeting. The dragging the feet, the slowing down, that's exactly what you don't want to do. There's nothing in here that says you move slowly. If you sound like you've got a lot of pent-up frustration that you've been prevented from moving forward. Shoot, I remember Miles asking in the last meeting, hey, aren't we going to talk about your organization? You know, wondering where it stood. So, you know, you're right. We were wondering why isn't it moving forward, and you were being frustrated that it wasn't moving forward. That's us just working collaboratively together. Slowing you down isn't what we want to do. Working with you is what we want to do. Only in these areas.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna go back to Miles's uh, words before, which is, you know, what's the critical item that has to get done first, so it doesn't hold up things, and maybe it's this new position. You know, forgetting the entire
Sure.
organization chart, we have this one critical item, which is, and I hear Oklahoma is a terrible place to retire to, by the way. Vermont's so nice.
Sorry.
But maybe that's like a key item. Look, we're gonna have all the stuff we have. We're pulling this one item out. Let's talk about it. Let's resolve it, and let's get that behind us. Not taking away that we shouldn't do the whole thing, but the critical one seems to be that one in all these things we're talking about. So
Well, there's actually two, right? Because all of this kind of came to a head also because there were questions about the operations manager.
that, well, whatever those two are, you know, as opposed to voting on
So
the
I proposed the
entire
org
thing.
chart and it didn't
Yes,
get.
we have. Yes, we have the org chart, and before, and not to slow it down by having everybody agree on the org chart, but to agree on the two positions that are critical that have to be filled. Maybe we can do that separate from the org chart, or maybe it's combined, but we focus on those two positions and get that completed, because that's, especially one of them sounds super critical. The other one kind of is happening, you know, indirectly because someone's doing two jobs instead of one, and we don't want that to happen. But let's figure out what the key elements are and get those two resolved, and that may by itself finalize the org chart, because those two pieces will be done. So there's that item, and there's this policy item that we really have to get behind us, because it's been around too long. I know it's frustrating. You know, I've looked at some of the discrepancies, and I've heard some of the stories of the last 6 months. So I don't know. I would suggest what we got left. 6 minutes. We can go through, let's decide that those two positions, and I don't know, I guess we should discuss them, not today, since we have 6 minutes, but let's do it maybe even next week. And I have no problem having more meetings to get things behind us instead of letting it fester. And maybe we can finalize this policy list here today and say, okay, we'll adopt this going forward. Or in case you want to make changes to 5, 10, and 11 for us to review. And then
I
we
don't
can,
think, yeah, I think we're down to 5. And if he could right now spite off, what are the regulatory filings that are major? Regulatory filings including,
Rate cases and the IRP essentially.
Would multi-year cover it?
yeah, well, why don't we just do rate cases? Regulatory filings, major regulatory filings, including rate cases and the IRP.
that's good.
I like it.
Okay, then I move to vote to approve this with that change.
And so which existing policy does this replace? I just want to make sure that we've got that because there is a delegation of authority policy and a couple others that are covered in these topics. I just want to make sure that we can actually one for
This
one replace
replaces-
what's in our files.
This replaces any previous delegation of authority document, policy.
So you want to keep this as a separate policy and not incorporate it into our other
Well,
policies that are
you can
existing?
incorporate it wherever you like, but yes, it is a separate policy.
But this would be the working policy going forward, and we'll adjust it or incorporate others as we go forward and figure out where that fits. But for today, this would be the working policy between the Board of Governors and the General Manager.
Yeah.
Not that it's, you know, in stone, because everything changes over time, but at least we have something to start with. And then whatever problems we find within this, then we can adjust it at some other point. But we don't have to go backwards to look at the old ones.
And did we feel we needed to make the change to $10,000 in number one?
I mean, how are they going to know? They're going to come and look at our policy?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they do.
Did we, it's fine then, it's fine with me. So who's
Fine.
screen sharing? You're gonna lose me in about 3 minutes. Who's screen sharing?
That's me.
Why don't you type in before regulatory filings, major regulatory filings, including. No, type onto the document.
I don't have, it's a PDF, so I can't just type
Ah.
it in. So I'm gonna make a comment on it so that we can circulate this after.
We can
To
say
make
it.
sure that we captured all of the changes and,
Well, I thought we were endeavoring to reapprove the
Yep,
delegation.
I think we can approve this document with only that change to number 5 and understanding that it supersedes all previous delegation authority.
Right. So should I restate the motion?
Yes, state the
I
motion.
move to approve this delegation of authority and guidelines for information sharing with a change to item number 5 to read major regulatory filings, including rate cases and the IRP. And that this, as approved, this will supersede any previous policies on delegation of authority.
You have a second?
Second,
Any discussion? In that case, we vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Done. All right, I think we've run out of time. When's our next meeting? Is it 2 weeks away or 3 weeks or 1 week?
next meeting is, I think, September 16th.
16th. So
It feels like Sarah needs us to move on this organization stuff.
yes,
yep.
for sure. Yep.
So I would suggest a special meeting before.
Could
one
we,
more next week.
could we approve, I mean, the one example she gave where she's moving this employee from hourly to salaried, I mean, that is just such a minor question. It's not really an addition. It doesn't sound like it's a major increase in cost. Why don't we just vote right now in this remaining time to give her the authorization to go ahead with that?
I thought, isn't that already done?
But does that give her a new title? We approving the new title, the new role for her as opposed to
Yeah,
just-
the shift from an hourly to a salary position and with a new title. Is that what you need, Sarah?
Yeah, based on this delegation of authority policy, yes.
And is it already done?
Yes, but I think that, I mean, like I said, I had to move forward on that.
Yeah,
But
great.
it's not done.
Yeah.
It's done as a salary, not as a position. I think we should approve the position and the salary. So it's official.
Agreed.
So Miles, you want to do that one?
No, frankly, I'm confused.
What's the title of the new person? The new position?
Assistant business manager.
Okay. I make a motion that we allow Sarah to appoint a new assistant business manager and move from a non-exempt to an exempt employee. I think that's it.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Done.
That's great. And the operations manager, we're all supportive of that. So are we slowing you down in recruiting or what are we? Is there anything we need to do so you're
I
feeling
think
like
we have to
you're
make it,
moving?
we have to make it a position that is a position, right? It's not really a position yet in HED.
Right,
So we have to approve a new position and then
right.
talk about the persons that are moving around within the organization. I think Sarah's got some ideas about moving a bunch of people left, right, up, down a little bit and filling in roles that they've partially done and what to do, even with Brian. I think, that's a discussion. And I think
Okay.
maybe that should be the next major one, even if we could do it the week after next, before the next meeting, get it behind us.
That'd be great.
Do it like the week of the 9th.
Yeah. We don't want to slow you down, Sarah. If anything, we want to speed you up.
Sounds good. I will send out a couple of times on the week of the 9th for a special meeting, and hopefully we can keep that one to less than an hour, but I'll book an hour or
Yep.
propose some times for a full hour.
That's
Okay.
great.
Okay. Thank you all for
Right.
taking the time and going a couple minutes over.
No, thank you so much, Sarah. We appreciate it.
Do we need to adjourn? I don't know
Yes.
if that.
Oh,
Yeah.
anybody make a motion to adjourn?
I
Motion
move
to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? We're gone. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
weekend.